Freaks, a term and idea that many are familiar with, but what does it portray and what does it really mean? You probably have seen what a freak is in various forms of media, but in some contexts it is used in terms of someone who has a disability. This happens to be the case in the movie Freaks, where many of the performers' acts or persona is centered around their disability. Freaks came out in 1932, where it was eventually banned because it was seen as exploitative among many other reasons. In this video essay, I will be investigating what representation serves in the context of Rosemary Garland Thompson's rhetoric of the exotic, and how the exotic rhetoric looks differently in the movies Sick, The Life and Death of Bob Flanagan, Supermasticus, where the depiction of disability and exogenous was received in an alternative way. In Rosemary Garland Thompson's The Politics of Staring Visual Rhetorics of the Disability, she outlines 4 rhetorics of disability: the wondrous, the sentimental, the realistic, and the exotic. The wondrous is seen as the type of representation that uses physical differences to invoke admiration and amazement. The sentimental reduces disabled people and diminishes them. They are seen as a helpless victim in need of service, protection, or aid. The realistic invokes the viewer to take action, contains images that are not used for commercialization, and minimizes the visual mark of disability. Lastly, Garland Thompson describes the exotic as presenting disabled figures as alien, distant, often sensationalized, eroticized, or entertaining in their difference. The idea of normalcy is a concept that originates around the concept of the ideal body. This idea of normalcy is something that Leonard J. Davis explored in the first chapter of The Disability Studies Reader, where he claims that, even in texts that do not appear to be about disability, the issue of normalcy is fully deployed. We can contextualize cinema by looking at how disability is depicted and see what it says about it in terms of the world. The rhetoric of the exotic strongly challenges the idea of what is considered normal and uses it to create a category of people that is sometimes inhumane and inferior. The film Freaks can be used as a prime example of the way that these rhetorical devices can be used. The term freak can be defined as a person, animal, or plant with an unusual physical abnormality. It is a term that has a history of being derogatory towards people who are considered different from normal and specifically used towards people with disabilities. Freak shows are usually a sideshow featuring abnormally developed people or animals that is an unusual event viewed for pleasures. One of the first instances of a freak show occurred in England in the mid-17th century and centered around conjoined twins. In many cases, the abnormalities that freak show performers have is their disability, and it is put on display as entertainment, which falls into the exotic rhetoric.
We told you we had living, breathing monstrosities. You laughed at them, shuddered at them, and yet, but for the accident of birth, you might be even as they are. They did not ask to be brought into the world, but into the world they came.
This clip shows that freak show performers are different from what they are considered to be regular people. Being the first scene in the movie makes it so the viewer may have similar reaction to the people shown later using prejudices because it is the introduction. Even before the movie was released, the idea of the members of this community being other than human was being portrayed in ads. On this poster, the text creates the idea that someone like Hans is not deserving of love because of the disability that he has. All of this demonstrates the idea of people with disabilities being distanced from those without, which is an aspect of the exotic rhetoric. The members of this community's position in society stay apparent because of the intro, and the constant reminder of what is normal is when Cleopatra is one of the few able-bodied persons that is constantly making fun of the members of the freak show. This type of representation of people with disability falls into the exotic rhetoric is only one example of what it could be. This example has to do with the outside perception of people with disabilities to be a spectacle or as entertainment. The people that are part of this freak show are contributing to an already preconceived notion of what a freak show is. But what if that wasn't the case? What if they were just being themselves on display that wasn't founded in ableist views? What if they directly addressed their disability and made it a part of the performance with more awareness of the preconceived notions around it? Would that change the distance that is put between them and what is considered normal or ordinary or even human that the eroticism creates? We can explore the possibility of this through the film Sick. This film was released in 1997 during a time when more alternative lifestyles were accepted. Bob Flanagan queers the idea of disability by emphasizing the intersectionality of how disability is intertwined with other aspects of his identity and links it back to his own humanity. In this film, it shows how Flanagan went from being the poster child of cystic fibrosis to exploring how aspects of his identity were connected through his passion for art. This exotic images comes from what other people see as normal and how they see his art and lifestyle as taboo and different. Is he purposely trying to be exotic, or is it other people's perception that make him exotic? This is a question that his art poses for an audience because it is not only his art, but is also his lifestyle. This provides interesting contrast to the image of people with disabilities in the movie Freaks because they are subjected to many prejudices that come along with the freak show. Would the rhetoric around freaks been different if they were actively addressing their disabilities? These two films are from extremely different decades and brings into question about how the representation of alternative perceptions of disability has changed over time. In Nicole Markotich's piece Disabling the Viewer Perceptions of Disability and Tom Browning's Freak, Markotich claims that Freaks perpetuates simplistic norms of good and evil based on a limited set of narratives that depend on opposition of what is culturally defined as normal versus horrific. How has the idea of normal changed now that there are more examples of diverse representation? How is that idea changing to what one thinks what the norm is? Taking from Leonard J. Davis' words, to understand the disabled body, one must return to the concept of norm, the normal body.